Hi everyone, I'm Miss Martine. As some of you young chefs already know, we have a bunch of videos on our FoodPrints website that show you how to do specific things in the kitchen, like how to cut an onion or how to use a can opener. We call these our kitchen skills videos, and you should definitely watch them before starting any recipe. Also, during our recipe videos, you might see this pop up. This symbol is a reminder to watch the skills videos first so that you know how to safely do whatever the teacher is doing on the screen. And one last important thing to remember, you should only do these recipes if you have a grown-up around who's ready to help you and keep you safe. And that's it. Now, have fun cooking.
Hi friends, I'm Miss Taylor, a teacher with the FoodPrints program. In today's lesson, we're going to be working with colors. That means we're going to be using different colored vegetables to create a delicious dish called a rainbow bowl. Okay, so let's get cooking. Whenever we tackle a FoodPrints recipe, the first thing we want to do is read the recipe all the way through. That way, we can make a really good plan. The next thing we think about is what's called our mise en place. Now, mise en place is just a fancy French word that simply means getting everything in place. So here's our mise en place. In front of me, I have my sharp knife, my peeler, my butter knife, a mixing spoon, a smaller spoon, measuring cups, salt, pot holders, olive oil, maple syrup, tahini, a lemon, and finally our main ingredient are delicious rainbow colored vegetables. So we have our beets, we have some potatoes, some sweet potatoes, carrots, and purple cabbage, and some Brussels sprouts. Usually when we are using the oven, we would start by preheating the oven before we get chopping or peeling or anything else. But this recipe calls for a lot of chopping and a lot of peeling, so we're going to wait until we're halfway through with all of the prep before we heat the oven up. So let's get started by chopping. As you probably know, whether you get them from the market or out of your own garden, vegetables always need to be washed. So while I go wash these vegetables, you can visit with a few of our friends at home who are washing their vegetables.
What do you say? Now I am brushing the dirt off of my carrots. And I'm rinsing those off of a potato.
Okay. Wow, looks like our friends did an awesome job washing. How about you? Are your vegetables all washed and clean? I'm sure you did a great job too. So let's move on to peeling. You can start with whatever vegetable you want to. I'm going to start with the sweet potato. Because sweet potatoes are hard and heavy, it's one of those tasks that's going to need a big sharp knife. And that means you're going to need a little help from an adult or a grown-up. So let's visit with some friends at home to see how their peeling and cutting is going.
You're doing the vegetables, peeling the vegetables?
Yes, we're peeling vegetables.
Sister, what is that?
Yes, I'm peeling the carrots.
Design, what you got over there?
A sweet potato. Mom,
Yeah.
I want to say, I'll say potatoes.
And you're peeling carrots too.
They did an awesome job working together. While they were peeling and chopping at home, I was busy doing the same thing in my kitchen. So in front of me I have my chopped sweet potatoes, my chopped carrots, and my chopped potatoes. You can see that everything is roughly the same size. That way, when we put them in the oven, everything will cook at the same speed. Okay, before we do any more cutting and peeling, this would be a good time to turn on our oven. And remember, turning on an oven is one of those kitchen tasks that we do with a grown-up. So you and your grown-up can first look to make sure there isn't anything in the oven. And if there is, just take it out, no big deal. When the oven is all clear, have your grown-up set the oven temperature to 400 degrees. So we're going to start by peeling our beet. We're going to start by putting our thumb on the bottom and pulling our peeler towards us. You'll notice that I'm kind of just skipping past the little root part because I'll just cut that off with my sharp knife. So then we're going to cut our beet in half. The first thing I'm going to do before cutting it in half is cutting off the little root tail and the top piece. This will make it easier for us to have a flat surface to cut on. So now I have a flat surface, I'm going to flip it over, take off that rooty tail. So the first thing you want to do is you want to cut it in half. And then we want our pieces to be relatively the same size. So if we look back at the size of our potatoes and sweet potatoes and carrots, we want our beets to be chunks similar to this. So I'm just keeping that in mind while I cut. I'm going to take my knife and I'm just going to do the same thing for both pieces. And then we're just going to do our best to cut this into chunks. So if you are working with a little helper, beets are very tough to get through. This might be one of those things that is easier for an adult to do for you. So I have my little bowl that I'm going to put my beets in, just like I did with the rest of my vegetables. And you'll notice my hands have turned a purplish pinkish color, which is why I saved the messy beets for last. So now that we have all of our vegetables cut and separated into different bowls, I'm just going to take a second to wash my hands, clean my area, and we'll come right back to toss our vegetables with olive oil. So I have my big bowl, I have a measuring spoon, and I have my olive oil. You can mix them all together or you can start with the one of your choice. I'm going to start with my sweet potatoes. So I'm going to start by pouring my sweet potatoes into a big bowl, and then I need to measure my oil. I'm going to be using a 1 tablespoon measure to pour out my olive oil. If you're working at home with a sibling or a partner, this is a really easy job to split up. One person can hold the spoon while the other person pours the oil. So I pour my oil on, and then I'm going to grab a spoon. And the important thing to remember is while you mix this up, every piece looks shiny and coated with oil. So you may have to mix for a minute or two, and that's okay. This extra work will really pay off in the end. Once your vegetables look nice and coated with the oil, you can go ahead and pour them onto your sheet pan. You can see my sheet pan is really close to me so that I don't have to go too far. So I'm going to take them, just going to dump them out. And you'll notice that I kind of left them in their own little line so that I have room for the other vegetables on the sheet tray. And we're just going to keep going. My potatoes are really close to me, so that's the next one I'm going to do. You can add another tablespoon of oil, but if you have enough oil in your bowl, you can just skip this step and keep going. I need a little bit more oil, so I'm going to do the same thing. Hold my spoon, pour out my olive oil, put them on my vegetables, and start tossing. This time, I'm going to toss with my hand so you see what it looks like. I always like to keep one hand dry. So this is my dry hand, and I'm going to put it on the side of my bowl. This is going to be my wet, dirty hand, so I'm putting it in, and I'm just rubbing each piece. I can see that they're looking shiny and really coated. And once you're at that point where everything looks coated with oil and nice and shiny, you can do the same thing. Go ahead and pour them on. So let's do the carrots next. Just pick up the carrots and pour them into our tossing bowl. And start tossing them too. And again, you can do this with your hand or with a spoon. When we're done, we place the carrots on the sheet pan. So the last thing we need to do is put our beets on the tray. So I'm just going to mix these up. You can tell that everything's getting all coated because the pieces start to feel really slippery and almost wet. I actually need a little bit more olive oil, which is perfect that I kept one hand dry. So I'm going to use my dry hand to hold my bottle of olive oil. and I'm just gonna pour it, put it in, and toss again. So then the last step is to put it on my baking sheet. Before this goes into the oven, now that we have all of our vegetables tossed with oil and on our sheet pan, the last thing we want to do before we put them in the oven is to season them with some salt. If you like pepper, you can also put a little bit of pepper on there. Today, I'm just going to use a little bit of salt because that's what I have on hand. This looks good to me. Let's put the sheet pan in the oven. Remember, whenever we do anything with the oven, we need a grown-up to help us. Now, the sheet pan won't be hot, but the oven will be. So to be safe, first your grown-up will put on an oven mitt or grab a pot holder like this to pick up the sheet pan. Next, just open the oven door and slide the sheet pan onto the shelf. Then close the door. I usually use the first rack so my veggies can get a little brown and crispy, but that's something you can decide. My oven timer doesn't work, so I'm just gonna set the timer on my phone for 45 minutes. You can do the same thing. There we go. We're not done chopping vegetables just yet. I'm going to chop our cabbage and our Brussels sprouts while you check in with some friends at home to see how they're doing it.
Your tunnel cut. Turn it straight down the middle. What are you doing? Good. Nice and locked up. Looking good. That's the sprouts and cabbage all cut up. Yes. Good job, guys.
They did an excellent job, didn't they? And here are mine. I've got my thinly sliced cabbage and I've got my Brussels sprouts cut in half. So I've got my same tossing bowl from earlier. We're already gonna have to clean up after cooking, so why dirty up more dishes? So I'm just gonna use the same bowl. I'm gonna toss my Brussels sprouts in, and I'm going to measure out 1 tablespoon of olive oil. This is pretty much exactly the same as what we did earlier, just with different vegetables. So I'm gonna put my olive oil on, and I'm going to use my spoon. After it's tossed and coated with oil, I'm gonna pour it onto my new sheet tray and move on to the cabbage. One thing to remember about the cabbage is when you're breaking it up and tossing it, you wanna make sure the pieces actually come apart. So you can pull them apart with your hand ahead of time, or you can just do that with your spoon. I'm just gonna toss these nice and easy. I'm gonna use my hand because I really want these pieces to get broken up so that they cook. And you can see I'm just kind of like pulling them apart with my hands, making sure everything looks nice and shiny. This purple cabbage is one of my favorite colors. It looks beautiful. Gonna take my bowl, toss it out on my sheet tray, and then we wanna season this stuff with a little bit of salt and pepper. I have a few last pieces that I'm just gonna make sure are really broken up so that they cook. I'm just gonna use a towel to dry off my oily hand. And then I'll grab my salt and we'll do the same thing. We'll do a sprinkle of salt over everything. Now, if you remember earlier, when we put our first sheet pan of vegetables in, we set our timer for 45 minutes. Our second sheet pan will only need about 25 minutes to cook, so let's check in with our timer to see how much time we have left. Oh, perfect. Roughly 25 minutes left on the timer, so it's time to put these babies in the oven. So now it's time to make our dressing. You don't have to make this dressing. Our roasted vegetables will be just as good without the dressing. Some people like to eat it over rice or alone or some other way, but right now I'm going to show you how to make the dressing. Again, it's totally optional. So for this dressing, we're going to have a few ingredients. We're going to be using olive oil, some tahini, maple syrup, and then also some fresh lemon for lemon juice. I have a juicer, so I'm going to use that. But if you don't have a juicer, you can easily use a fork and just kind of pierce it out. But because I want to measure out 3 tablespoons of lemon juice, I'm going to use my juicer. So with our lemons, we want to push and turn. Luckily, this juicer has a little pouring spout, so I'm just going to use that to pour. So I have my tablespoon, and I'm just going to pour right from the pouring spout. So there's 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and we're actually going to have to use our other half of lemon because we need 3 tablespoons of lemon juice for this recipe. That should be enough. Let's see. Perfect. So we're going to put that in and we're going to move on to our other ingredients. We also need 3 tablespoons of maple syrup. Since this dressing is all going in the same place, I'm going to use the same measuring spoon. I've got 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and then the 3rd tablespoon. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to measure out the tahini. So tahini can sometimes be very thick, and you might notice that there's oil on the top layer. If that's the case, you can use a butter knife or a spoon to mix it up a little bit before measuring it. We want a 1/2 cup, so we're actually going to use a spoon to spoon it into the measuring cup before we put it into our bowl. So I've got my spoon and I'm just gonna pour in. And you can see it's going to look very thick, kind of just like peanut butter. And then you're gonna pour it in your bowl with the rest of your dressing. This recipe calls for a whisk. I don't have a whisk, so I'm just gonna use a fork. We're really gonna have to get our muscles in this though, because it'll take a second for our dressing to actually be smooth enough to pour. So you'll see it's kind of chunky right now, which is okay. It won't look like this the whole time. If you are working with a sibling or with a partner or a helper, this might be a good job to take turns doing, just so your shoulders don't hurt too bad. So I'm gonna keep mixing until it's a nice consistency. Don't give up, it's gonna get there. The last thing you'll do is add a little bit of water at a time until you get the dressing as thin as you want it. I'm gonna fill up my measuring cup just so I have some water right next to me. So I've got my water and I've got my 1 tablespoon measure that I was talking about. So I'm just gonna start with 1 tablespoon at a time. When you're thinking about the consistency of your dressing, think about how you'd like it to be. If you like your dressing to be really thick, cool, maybe you won't add as much water. If you want your dressing to be thin and pourable, like I do, you might add a little bit more water. And I'm just gonna keep mixing until it's a really, really nice, smooth looking dressing. It's really starting to come along. You can really tell that the ingredients are starting to get mixed in better because you don't see nearly as many lumps as we did in the beginning. And that's pretty much it for the dressing. So since I still have a little bit of time left on my timer, I'm gonna take this opportunity to clean up my workspace a bit and get my countertop ready for those vegetables. When we take the sheet pans out of the oven, they'll be really hot. So I just wanna protect my countertop from all that heat. So I'm putting some pot holders down, and as you can see, I don't have enough pot holders, so I'm just gonna use a kitchen towel, and you can feel free to do the same thing. You can use oven mitts, a kitchen towel, or pot holders, whatever you have to protect that counter. Oh, great, our timer just went off, so that means those veggies are finally ready to come out of the oven. Oh wow, these look delicious. And now we plate. We finally got to the part where we finally get to eat. So if you mixed all of your things together, you can just dump them onto your plate. Don't forget your sheet pans are hot. I really want to see the individual colors, so I'm going to separate mine out onto a little plate. Whenever you need to grab anything from your sheet pan, remember to have your grown-up use a pot holder so that nobody gets burned or hurt. Oh man, this looks so good. Look at that rainbow. And then we'll do some of the potatoes for some yellowish color. If you made the dressing, now would be the time to drizzle your dressing on. And if you didn't make the dressing, this is a perfect time to just jump right in and eat. If you like a lot of sauce, you can put a lot of sauce on. If you just like a little bit of sauce, you can just put a little bit of sauce on. This is your show, so do what feels right. Oh my goodness, this looks so good. Our hard work has finally come to fruition. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining me today. And don't forget to check out some of our other videos if you had fun with me. Enjoy your meal.